It is both a pleasure and an honor for me to have been invited here to speak to this wonderful audience on the subject of MEK and the subject of Ashraf. The only thing that would provide me with greater pleasure would be for the residents of Ashraf to be protected, for MEK to be delisted, and for democracy to return to Iran. That would be the greatest honor and the greatest pleasure. The enthusiasm that has been generated at this conference, including the enthusiasm for Mrs. Rajavi, is just infectious, and I think is a great illustration of why the ideals of the people who are here will ultimately prevail. And my fondest hope would be that Mrs. Rajavi could come to the United States and Americans could see what an inspired and inspiring woman she really is. Thank you.
Thank you.
The outrages that have gone on at Camp Ashraf have to stop. People there have been promised protection by the United States, by the Geneva Convention. They should be given protection. The kind of massacre that occurred last April 8th should never have happened. It's a disgrace to the Iraq government to have participated in that, to have allowed Iran to perpetrate that kind of horrible massacre on their territory. That should stop, and it's about time that we sided with the people who oppose the regime in Iran. After all, we supported the overthrow of Mubarak. We have intervened to assist the people of Libya against Gaddafi. The regime in Iran is far worse than either of those two. Gaddafi, very bad man, did really terrible things, but he's kind of been neutered. And he isn't a danger to anybody but himself and his own people right now. And Mubarak was never a danger to the United States. Ahmadinejad, Khomeini, the entire regime in Iran has been a danger to the United States for the last 30 years. It continues to be. And they participate in the same slaughter of their own people as these dictators that we have sought to overthrow. So the United States government should be for regime change in Iran. All I can tell you is that what Maliki allowed to happen or participated in at Camp Ashraf is a violation of human rights. It's the murder of innocent people. It was described by Senator John Kerry of the United States as a massacre. It's been described as an outrage by the UN Commission on Human Rights, by the Commissioner. I mean, something like that should not happen. And Maliki should be held responsible for it because it seems to me that the entreaties of the Iranian government seem more important to him than the right thing to do. The United States of America should be for regime change in Iran. I think that should be our position. It seems to me if we were for regime change in Egypt, we should be for regime change in Iran. That's a pretty simple, just logical analysis. Iran has been one of the worst enemies of the United States in the last 20 to 30 years. It's the biggest supporter of terrorism in the world, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. It has slaughtered hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of its own people. Many of them relatives of the people you see here today. To talk about freedom and democracy and movements for freedom and democracy and not talk about changing the regime in Iran is hypocrisy. I've always been in favor of remaining in Iraq and in Afghanistan for as long as necessary to get the job done. We should be there until everybody is confident, including the people of Iraq, that we have a stable, strong democracy in Iraq. And thank you.
It's been my privilege to attend this magnificent gathering here in Paris today under the leadership of Madame Rajavi and the able people who have been supporting her in making this arrangement so successful. I come from a small country in the world. We are part of a larger gathering called the Nordic countries, and the majority of parliamentarians in all these countries, like in so many others, have signed a declaration in support of the resistance movement in Iran and the campaign that is ongoing for the freedom of Ashraf, the people living in Camp Ashraf, and many of the other just causes that have been pronounced here today. We all believe in a free and democratic Iran. We think the people of Iran deserve to be able to elect their own leaders in free and fair elections under the rule of law, living in a secular state with all the freedom that so many of us in the rest of the world are used to enjoying. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom for women to pursue their own careers in every walk of life, and so on and so forth. I am very much encouraged by what I have seen here today. I very much wish for the success of the movement that is organizing this gathering. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'm sure ultimately victory will be yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diese Konferenz als ungeheuer stark erlebt. Sie hat mich auch in meinen Gefühlen erreicht, weil ich hier starke Menschen und obwohl sie schon länger vom Iran weg sind, sie sind so verbunden mit denen, die im Iran kämpfen, die unterdrückt werden. Und ich habe das insbesondere für Frauen gespürt, weil ich Ihnen sagen kann, die Verfolgung der Frauen ist brutal und grausam. Das Zweite, was mich sehr bewegt hat, ist dieser Widerstand, der ja ganz stark von einer weiblichen Führungsperson angeführt und betrieben wird. Und ich muss sagen, ich schäme mich sehr, dass auch mein Land lange Zeit angenommen hat, MEK wäre eine terroristische Bewegung. Das hat Gott sei Dank unser Rechtssystem auf höchster Ebene widerlegt. Insofern siegt das Recht über Willkür und Vermutung. Und ich bin davon überzeugt, dass diese starke Bewegung des hochzivilisierten, intelligenten und emotional starken Volkes auch Erfolg haben wird. Ich habe deswegen ganz bewusst hier gesagt, ihr Iraner und Iranerinnen kämpft nicht nur für euch, sondern ihr kämpft für alle menschlichen, für all human beings, für alle menschlichen Wesen, denn die Menschenrechte sind was Universelles. Das haben wir zwar lange Zeit nicht sehen wollen, aber sie sind es. Und ich wünsche dieser iranischen Widerstandsbewegung, dass sie immer mehr Unterstützung bekommt. Wir haben es heute gesehen, nationale Parlamente, das Europäische Parlament, Bürgermeister, NGOs. Ich denke, dass diejenigen, die heute hier waren, sehr stark motiviert worden sind. Wir machen weiter.
Dankeschön.
Wenn ich noch ein Wort sagen darf zu dem ganz wichtigen Komplex Ashraf. Die Menschen müssen wirklich geschützt werden. Eine Aufforderung an alle Menschen in der Welt, aber insbesondere jetzt erst einmal in Europa, in unseren nationalen Parlamenten, dass wir daran politisch weiterarbeiten. Denn wir erleben sehr oft, wir haben gute Menschenrechte, die UNO-Menschenrechtskonvention ist stark, aber die Praxis bleibt oft weiter zurück. Und deswegen war auch hier die Solidarität der Iraner mit ihren Gefolterten, mit ihren Gefangenen eine ganz sehr starke Bewegung. Wenn Sie die Initiative, weitergehende Initiative der europäischen Delegationen, wenn Sie die Initiative von Mrs. Ashton nehmen, wenn Sie das Europäische Parlament nehmen, haben sie sich nicht mit diesem "Wir lassen euch nicht herein" abgefunden, sondern machen weiter, sowohl mit der UNO wie mit anderen Staaten. Also wir müssen den Druck erhöhen. Wir haben immer wieder erlebt, in dem Maße, wie wir diese Tatbestände weltweit zum Thema machen, hat es auch Folgen. Und insofern denke ich, dass wenn die Menschen unentwegt dieses weiterhin zum Thema machen, gerade auch im Irak, dann kann es nicht so bleiben. Und die Amerikaner haben eigentlich im Augenblick das beste Mittel in der Tasche, denn sie hatten eine Vereinbarung und die Vereinbarung ist nicht eingehalten.